here's everything you need to know about the pivot point report on edgeful.com. So we're looking at futures right now. This explanation will apply to all stocks, Forex, crypto, and futures. The only difference between stocks and the other three is the indicator that you're going to need to use on TradingView. So we're looking at YM in the last 6 months in the New York session. This is really important. So now we're on TradingView. We're going to go to my indicators here. I'm going to scroll down to pivot points by session. If you want to access these indicators, click the right side of your screen, enter your TradingView username right over here. You can find that by clicking your profile button at the top left. You'll see your username here. Mine is edgeful. Yours will be something else. Then when you click on your indicators, this invite only will appear and you'll have them all here. So first of all, it is very important that you understand what is being measured when you are looking at the session. So this is what applies to futures, Forex, and crypto. Now, when you're looking at the New York session, the pivots are calculated based on only the previous New York session's range. So in this case, you can see here all the pivot points, and we also have them only for today. So these are the relevant ones, like for the price action you'd be trading right down here. So you can see pivot point on YM today, 42,823, 42,824. This is just rounded out. And you can see up here, 43,032, 43,032, et cetera, et cetera. So if you don't have access to TradingView, don't worry, you can still use this right over here. And now you can just plot out the levels every day. These will be static every single day. So that they don't change throughout the day. They'll be updated tomorrow and you'll get all the updated levels tomorrow. So don't worry about that. Now let's look at a couple examples here. Let's just zoom into any of these days. Let's look at Monday, March 10th. And I want to go over what this report measures exactly. So what you can see here is that there is this section which tells you where is price opening today. So you can see there's between each of the levels, above R3 and below S3. This table here will tell you how often price will touch each of the pivots based on where it opens. So here, let's look at this day, March 10th. So let's go to March 10th. Do that, and then I'm going to do March 10th. Okay, so this day here on YM opened between S1 and S2. So if I go over here, you're going to see that now everything appears because we're only looking at one day. Nothing should appear on any of these other days. So only right here because that's where it opened on this session. So let me zoom in a little bit. And what you can see now is that price touched S1 and S2 and not S3 or the pivot point. So what you should see is S1 was touched, S2 was touched, and then over here tells you where did price close today. So you can see closed between S1 and S2. So it over here bounced, closed between S1 and S2. So really the way to use this is to say, today is opening between X and X point. And now, let me just go back to 6 months. Today's opening between X and X point. I want to know what is the probability of price touching each of the pivots based on where it opens. So if it opens above R3, for example, or let's just say R2 and R1, which has 10 instances in the last 6 months, you can see that not a single time has it touched S3. So that should give you some sort of indication. Now, if you look between R1 and the pivot point, 51 days total, and now you can see where price is most likely to touch. You do not want to expect it to get to R3. You don't want to expect it to get to S3 either. Now, if you're in a trade, let's say you are long, you can target R1, but you don't really want to target R2. Price is probably not going to make it there. So this is great to understand the probabilities of price actually reaching your levels. And you can see them all right here. And this is where price typically will close on the day. So let's look at a different example here. Let's look at Friday, March 7th. And now price opened right over here. So you can see, touched the pivot point, touched S1, closed between R1 and the pivot point. So you touched the pivot point, touched S1, closed between R1 and the pivot point. So that is how this is being calculated. Now, what's really important is that if you were to go to the London session now, so you go over here, I'm going to change this to be 3 a.m. And then now I need to obviously change my market sessions to be the London session. And now, let's just use this day here as the example. Let's just use this day as the example. Friday, March 7th, we're already on it. I'm going to change to London. Open between the pivot point and S1. So right over here. You can see it touched pivot point, touched S1. So you can see touched pivot point, touched S1. Closed between S1 and S2, closed between S1 and S2. So it's based on the session that you're looking at. Really, really important. It is obviously all the levels change based on whatever session you're looking at. Now, the bi-weekday variant allows you very simply to filter by the weekday, and then the by previous candle, let's go back to the New York session here. By previous candle is going to allow you to filter for what happened yesterday. Okay. So let's look at this, Thursday the 6th. So this day here, now we want to look at what happened here. You can see this day was green, very obviously. This day was green. And then now we're going to look at Thursday the 6th. So obviously this day was green. If I switch over to red, nothing is going to appear on any of these because the prior day was not red, obviously. And then you can see here price opened between S1 and the pivot point. So I'm going to go right here. And now you can see everything, price touch pivot, price touch S1, close between S1 and S2. So how do you actually use this now? You can see that if you're trading any of these days, like for example, just today, for example, price opens between R1 and the pivot point. So let's just go over here, R1 and pivot point. And now I know 70% of the time prices touch the pivot point. So that gives me a short bias targeting this area. Now, this is a pretty flawless example of price opens, flushes right to the pivot point, and then bounces. Now, in this case, this would be your target. This is a great place to take profits right over here. And it did obviously magnet to this level throughout the rest of the day. So that's how you can use this report. If you have any questions on this, and just one last thing before I go, if you're looking at stocks, like let's say I go to Tesla, and then I'm going to turn on my extended trading hours just so we can break out these sessions. Now the by session is not the one that you want to look at. Really important. You want to go to the pivot points, the regular pivot points. That is what's going to properly plot out the pivots for stocks. Really, really important. So I just wanted to mention that. It's the exact same concept. If you go to Tesla, it's the same exact thing. All you have to do is make sure that you are looking at the pivot points indicator on TradingView. And thank you for watching. I hope this is helpful.